All right, everyone, welcome in. It's time for another deep dive. And today we're headed straight to 1947 to witness the birth of India and Pakistan.
A pivotal moment for sure.
Absolutely. And to guide us through this complex period, we're diving deep into Chandrachur Ghose's book, 1947 to 1957, India, The Birth of a Republic.
This book is a goldmine, really.
It really is. Ghoze has uncovered some incredible declassified documents, personal accounts.
You're going to have some serious aha moments.
Oh, I guarantee it. The stuff we're about to uncover is mind-blowing.
It really is. And you know what struck me is how Ghoze contrasts this idealistic vision of independence with the messy realities of actually building a nation from scratch.
Right. It wasn't all sunshine and roses.
Not at all. It's high-stakes diplomacy, political maneuvering, and the human cost of partition all rolled into one.
Okay, so let's unpack this right off the bat. The book tackles a question that's always baffled me. Why on earth did the Indian National Congress, the very symbol of India's fight for freedom, agree to partition?
Right, they opposed it for decades.
They were vehemently against it for years and years.
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. You have to remember, by the 1940s, the Congress was the dominant force in Indian politics, a unified India that was at the heart of their entire ideology.
It wasn't just some theoretical debate either.
No, not at all.
This is happening right after World War II. The global power structure is in flux.
Talk about a time to be making decisions about a nation's future.
Seriously, so much uncertainty. What a time to be alive.
Absolutely. And the war changed everything. It exposed all these cracks in the British Empire and created a space for new players like Japan to try and exert their influence.
Wait, Japan now? That's a curveball I wasn't expecting.
Right.
Tell me more about Japan's role in all of this.
It's fascinating. It's a side of the story that often gets overlooked, but Ghoze uncovers how Japan, during the war, they used propaganda to position themselves as these liberators of Asia from Western imperialism.
Interesting.
Right, and it was strategically motivated, for sure,
Of course.
but it resonated with some Indian nationalists who dared to dream of an India free from British rule, perhaps aligned with a more independent Asia.
So you have Japan throwing a wrench into the works, the war ends, and everyone's scrambling for a solution. Enter the Cripps mission.
Right.
What was the Cripps mission exactly?
Well, in a nutshell, the Cripps mission was Churchill's attempt to, I guess you could say, appease the Indians in 1942.
Okay.
They offered Dominion status after the war, essentially promising self-rule. But eventually, and Ghoze encourages us to really consider, was this a genuine offer or just a clever political tactic?
To keep India on Britain's side during the war.
Exactly.
So was it genuine?
Well, Ghoze, he presents a very balanced perspective.
As a good historian should.
He explores the anxieties and agendas on both sides, and the Congress, obviously wary of British intentions and eager for immediate self-governance. They rejected the Cripps mission because it included this provision allowing provinces to opt out of a future Indian Union.
Oh, I see. So they saw that as a way to divide and conquer.
Exactly. A sneaky way to divide India through the back door, weakening the nation before granting independence.
Talk about adding fuel to the fire. So you have a skeptical Congress, a Muslim League led by Jinnah, who's becoming more and more insistent on this idea of establishing a separate Muslim state.
Things are getting tense.
Very tense. So what's Jinnah's endgame here?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question with Jinnah. Was a separate Pakistan truly his ultimate goal?
Or was he playing a more strategic game?
Exactly. Was he leveraging this fear of Hindu dominance to solidify his own power?
Interesting.
And Ghoze really digs into this. He examines it from all angles.
He uses some interesting sources too, right?
He does. He pulls from accounts from insiders like Durga Das, a prominent journalist at the time.
Okay.
And Durga Das suggests that Jinnah might have been intentionally derailing any possibility of a unified India.
Fascinating.
Right, because he knew a divided India, even if it meant a smaller Pakistan, it would make him the ultimate authority.
It's brilliant if you think about it.
It is.
He's playing the long game.
Absolutely. And in a larger, potentially Congress-dominated India, he would always be a step behind.
Wow. Okay, so the war is over, the Cripps mission has failed, and Jinnah is holding firm on this idea of Pakistan. Where does that leave key figures like Gandhi and Nehru?
Okay, so this is where it gets really fascinating. Ghoze reveals a Gandhi who's deeply conflicted. He was deeply committed to nonviolence.
Of course.
Yet faced with a world consumed by war. Imagine that.
It's hard to reconcile those two things.
And get this, he even explored the idea of a nonviolent army.
A nonviolent army.
I know it's an interesting concept. Even some of his closest allies were probably puzzled by that one.
I mean, I admire the optimism, but how do you even begin to...
It seems almost whimsical now.
It does.
But this was Gandhi. He firmly believed in the power of nonviolent resistance, even against armed forces.
Powerful.
But Ghose points out that this wasn't a universally shared view, especially not by Nehru Gandhi's chosen successor.
So we have Nehru the pragmatist to Gandhi's idealist.
Precisely. Right. And Ghose details this growing friction between them, especially when it came to the use of military force. Nehru, a student of global politics, knew that a strong military was essential for India to protect its interests on the world stage.
Right. He'd seen how quickly things could escalate.
Exactly. He knew India had to be ready, and this, of course, clashed with Gandhi's pacifist beliefs.
Wow, it's almost Shakespearean, these monumental figures grappling with impossible choices, the destiny of millions hanging in the balance. Where does Ghose take us from here?
Well, all of this internal struggle within the Congress is playing out against a backdrop of escalating violence.
Right, things are heating up.
Ghose doesn't shy away from that harsh reality in Punjab and Bengal, where communal violence fueled by fear and uncertainty was spiraling out of control.
A reminder that even amidst these historical turning points, it's the everyday people who often pay the highest price.
Ghose drives that point home. He makes sure we remember that history is about people. He brings us face to face with the human cost of partition, the mass displacement, the refugee crisis, the brutal realities faced by so many.
It's those personal stories that make history come alive. It's easy to get caught up in the grand narratives, but Ghose's book, it forces us to confront the human cost of these world-altering decisions.
It really does.
It makes you wonder.
It makes you wonder about the choices made and the long-lasting consequences of those pivotal moments. I mean, out of all that chaos, emerged not one, but two brand new nations.
Right.
Can you imagine that challenge?
It's mind-boggling.
It wasn't just about independence. It was about building everything from scratch.
Everything. Governments, institutions.
Everything.
Wow, where do you even start when you're literally building a nation from the ground up? What does Ghose say about how they tackled this monumental task?
Well, he dives right into the decisions that shaped those early years for both India and Pakistan.
Okay.
For example, imagine trying to reorganize the armed forces.
Oh, yeah.
Before partition, you had the Indian Army, one unified force representing the entire nation.
Right.
Suddenly, that has to be split in two.
Oh, wow.
Personnel, equipment, loyalties, all of it.
Yeah, talk about a logistical nightmare. I can't imagine how they untangled that mess.
It was a delicate dance, for sure. Ghose uses actual meeting minutes and confidential reports from back then to show how leaders like Lord Mountbatten, who stayed on as India's first Governor General, worked day and night to ensure a smooth transition. Think about it, dividing units, allocating resources, figuring out the command structure for two entirely new armies.
Right.
All while preventing the entire system from collapsing.
And let's not forget the human side of it all. You had soldiers who had served together, fought side by side, now facing the possibility of being on opposite sides of a conflict.
Exactly. And Ghose doesn't gloss over that he brings in these personal stories of soldiers caught in this new reality. Friendships, tested, loyalties, questioned. You really feel that deep sense of uncertainty that permeated those early days.
It's a good reminder that partition wasn't just about lines on a map.
Right.
It was about lives, uprooted communities torn apart, and the long-lasting impact it had on both nations.
And as if that wasn't enough, there was also this enormous task of building the civil services.
Oh, right, the civil service.
This was the backbone of the colonial administration, the machinery that kept everything running. But how do you dismantle a system you spent decades fighting against?
Yes.
While also relying on its expertise to build your own nation?
It's quite a paradox.
It is. You could say that again. Ghose uncovers this clash between the old guard, those experienced ICS officers who had served under the British, and the new generation of nationalist leaders who were determined to break free from colonial legacies.
So what happened? Did they just get rid of the entire old system, or did they find a way to make it work for them?
It was more of a balancing act, a blend of practicality and idealism. Ghose reveals how figures like Vallabhbhai Patel, India's first home minister, he saw the value in experience and administrative continuity. They could just throw away decades of institutional knowledge, so they offered incentives for British officers to stay on, while also creating paths for Indian officers to rise through the ranks.
So a bit of a renovation project rather than a complete demolition.
Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
They essentially Indianized the civil service, making it more representative of the new nation while maintaining its core functions.
That's really interesting. But that couldn't have sat well with everyone. Ghose mentions the socialists and communists, weren't they eager to dismantle the entire colonial structure?
Absolutely. Groups like the Socialist Party with leaders like Jayaprakash Narayan,
Okay.
they pushed for radical changes. They wanted a more equitable and decentralized system, seeing the ICS as a relic of British elitism.
Right.
Their focus was on empowering the masses, especially the rural poor.
So you have this clash of visions, the socialists pushing for a clean slate and the Congress under Nehru and Patel taking a more pragmatic approach. Did they find any common ground?
It was an ongoing tension,
Mm-hmm.
for sure. Ghose highlights Nehru's own internal struggle. He was torn between his socialist ideals and the practical demands of leading a vast and diverse nation.
Right.
He knew that rapid economic development was crucial, which meant attracting foreign investment and relying, at least to some extent, on the existing industrial infrastructure.
Which the British had built.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this put him at odds with the more radical factions within his own party.
So he's walking a tightrope.
Absolutely.
It's fascinating how Ghose weaves together all these threads, the political maneuvering, the economic hurdles, the social upheaval, and the personalities who shaped it all. It's like a multi-layered story unfolding before our eyes.
And just like a good drama, there's no shortage of intrigue.
You're right.
Ghose reveals the power struggles within the Congress, the clashes between Nehru and Patel, and the constant push and pull between different factions.
It's a side of history we don't often hear about, those internal conflicts, the compromises made, the personalities behind the history book narratives.
Exactly, and those details are what make Ghose's account so compelling. He peels back the layers, showing us the human side of these historical events.
Right.
We're not just told what happened, we see it unfold through the eyes of those who lived it.
Speaking of the human experience, Ghose dedicates a significant portion of the book to the refugee crisis. This wasn't just a side note to partition, was it? This was a humanitarian crisis of unimaginable proportions.
It was a defining moment, a tragedy that still shapes the relationship between India and Pakistan today.
Absolutely.
Ghose doesn't sugarcoat the scale of the displacement. Millions of people, Hindus, Muslims, and Sikhs, driven from their homes, caught in the crossfire of violence.
Just trying to picture those scenes, the panic, the desperation, the sheer scale of suffering, it's heart-wrenching.
Ghose uses first-hand accounts and official reports to paint a very vivid picture of those times: overcrowded refugee camps, desperate journeys on trains, the agonizing search for loved ones,
Right.
and all amidst a newly independent nation struggling to find its footing.
It makes you realize that freedom, as joyous as it was, came at a tremendous cost.
And the cost wasn't just physical displacement. Ghose explores the psychological scars, the loss of identity, the shattered communities, the enduring trauma that continues to affect generations. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, but also a stark reminder of the lasting impact of division.
Absolutely, and Ghose doesn't stop there. He digs into how the government tried to manage this crisis, the debates over resettlement policies, the struggle to provide basic necessities like food and shelter, the immense effort to rebuild lives shattered by the violence. It's hard to grasp the scale of that challenge, a brand new nation still figuring things out, now faced with this massive influx of refugees needing everything.
And it wasn't just about immediate relief. Ghose shows us the long-term ramifications, the strain on resources, the social tensions that arose, the political complexities that emerged from partition.
It's such a multifaceted story, the triumph of independence intertwined with the tragedy of partition, the hope for the future clouded by the shadows of the past.
And it's a story that continues to resonate the decisions made in those crucial years. The compromises, the power struggles, the way they addressed the refugee crisis, all of it left an undeniable mark on India and Pakistan even today.
It reminds us that history isn't just something we read about in books. It's the foundation on which our present is built. And the choices we make today are shaped by the events of yesterday.
Exactly. Ghose's book challenges us to wrestle with that complexity, to understand the nuances and contradictions of those pivotal years, and to appreciate the lasting legacy of India's tumultuous birth.
It's a fascinating and thought-provoking journey, and I'm sure you're eager to dive deeper into the specific challenges and triumphs that defined this era. So, where do we go from here?
Well, creating India and Pakistan wasn't just about dividing land and resources. It was about defining identities, creating national narratives, and navigating the complex world of international relations. And that's where we'll pick up in our next segment, exploring how these newly formed nations found their place on the world stage and the challenges they faced in forging their own unique paths.
So stepping onto that world stage as a newly independent nation, especially during the Cold War era.
Right, everyone's picking sides.
The US or the Soviet Union.
Exactly.
So how did India navigate those early years on the global stage?
Well, this is where things get really interesting. India, under Nehru's leadership, decided to forge their own path.
Okay.
One distinct from the superpowers of the time, they chose a policy called non-alignment,
Non-alignment.
aiming to maintain their independence and autonomy in international affairs.
That sounds like a bold move for a newly independent nation.
It was, and Ghose does a fantastic job detailing how Nehru managed this delicate balancing act.
Right.
He cultivated relationships with both the US and the Soviet Union, securing aid and support from each, without becoming a pawn in their game.
So it's like strategic friendship.
Is
Getting what they need without being tied down to one side's agenda.
Precisely.
I like it. But back home, there were still those unresolved tensions with Pakistan.
Right.
Especially over Kashmir.
Of course.
Does Ghose shy away from those tough topics?
Not at all. He tackles the Kashmir issue head-on, going right back to the root of the dispute.
Okay.
He talks about the invasion by tribal militias backed by Pakistan,
Right.
and India's decision to get directly involved militarily.
So this wasn't just a border skirmish.
No.
This was a full-blown war.
It was a chaotic situation fueled by religious tensions, territorial ambitions, and this deep-seated mistrust between the two nations.
It had long-lasting consequences, I imagine.
It did. It cast a long shadow over the relationship between India and Pakistan, setting the stage for decades of conflict.
Wow.
And Ghose uses declassified documents and first-hand accounts to give us a real sense of the fighting, the political maneuvering, and the eventual ceasefire brokered by the United Nations.
Right.
It's a sobering reminder of how deeply those wounds of partition ran,
Yeah.
and how challenging it was to find lasting peace.
It makes you realize that declaring independence is just one step.
Right.
There are often many more battles to be fought on the road to peace and stability.
Absolutely.
So we've got international pressure, internal tensions, and on top of all that, there was also that massive undertaking of integrating the princely states.
Oh yes, the princely states.
Remember when the British left? There were hundreds of these semi-autonomous kingdoms scattered across the subcontinent.
Like a jigsaw puzzle of kingdoms,
Exactly.
each with its own ruler, laws, and history.
How on earth did India manage to bring them all under one flag?
It was a remarkable feat.
It really was.
Orchestrated largely by Sardar Patel, often called India's Iron Man.
Patel.
Ghose reveals how Patel used a combination of incentives and pressure to bring these princely states into the fold. He offered generous financial packages
Okay.
and guarantees of personal privileges to the rulers who chose to join India.
So a bit of carrot and stick.
Exactly. And Ghose doesn't sugarcoat it. He makes it clear that Patel, with Nehru's backing, made it very clear that integration wasn't optional.
Right.
They used India's growing economic and military influence to their advantage, making it clear that resisting was futile.
But what about the people living in those princely states? Did they have any say in this?
Well, the situation varied from state to state. Ghose points out that some areas welcomed the idea of joining India, while others resisted or even demanded independence.
Oh, wow.
He explains how that integration process played out differently depending on the region. Some transitions were peaceful, while others, well, let's just say they required a bit more persuasion.
Sounds like a real tightrope walk, trying to respect the existing rulers while also listening to the will of the people. How did they manage that?
It certainly wasn't easy. Ghose gets into the nitty-gritty of integrating these diverse entities into India's administrative structure.
Right.
It involved tackling complex issues like land ownership, legal systems,
Wow.
and bridging cultural differences. There were bound to be bumps along the way.
It's mind-boggling how India managed to hold it all together in those early years.
It really speaks to the leadership of people like Nehru and Patel.
Their ability to navigate these complex issues.
Exactly. Build consensus and cultivate a sense of national unity amidst all that chaos. They were definitely tested.
It's a good reminder that building a nation isn't just about drawing borders and writing constitutions. It's about leadership compromise and finding a way forward together, even when the path ahead is uncertain.
You hit the nail on the head. And I think one of the things I appreciate most about Ghose's work is that he doesn't just focus on the big names and political maneuvers.
Right.
He also brings to light the lives of ordinary people and the everyday challenges they faced in a duly independent nation.
That's what makes history come alive, those personal stories. What were some of those everyday challenges? Ghose highlights.
He explores the efforts to improve literacy rates, to make healthcare accessible to more people, to promote economic development,
Okay.
and to tackle poverty and inequality. These were massive undertakings, each with their own sets of hurdles and triumphs.
So India was really striving to build a modern and equitable nation. Did they succeed?
Well, Ghose provides a balanced perspective on that.
Okay.
He acknowledges the progress that was made, but he doesn't shy away from the challenges that persisted. And we have to remember, India was starting from scratch in many ways. They had widespread poverty, low literacy rates, and the lingering effects of colonial rule to overcome.
Of course.
Building a nation is a marathon, not a sprint,
That's a good way to put it.
and progress takes time and sustained effort.
It's a good reminder that independence wasn't the finish line, it was the starting line
Exactly.
of a long and complex journey toward creating a nation that truly lived up to its ideals.
Precisely. And Ghose's book offers us a window into those pivotal early years, the decisions, the hurdles, and the lasting legacies that continue to shape India today.
It's a captivating story full of drama, political intrigue, and those profound moments of human resilience. So what's the key takeaway you want our listener to walk away with from this deep dive?
For me, it's about understanding history's complexity, appreciating the nuances, the contradictions, the fact that there are always multiple sides to every story.
Right.
It's easy to get caught up in the headlines and the grand narratives. But it's those individual stories, the personal struggles, the everyday experiences that truly bring history to life and connect us to the past.
It reminds us that history isn't just a collection of dates and names in a textbook.
Right.
It's a tapestry woven from the lives of countless individuals, each with their own hopes, dreams, and experiences that shape the world we live in today.
And Ghose's book beautifully reveals that tapestry full of surprises, insights, and enduring lessons for us all.
If you're looking to understand modern India, its triumphs, its struggles, its place on the world stage, you need to understand its past.
Absolutely.
And Ghose's work, 1947 to 1957, India, The Birth of a Republic, is an incredible place to start.
It's a journey worth taking.
It really is. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into India's journey from colonialism to independence.
Thank you for having me.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep into the endlessly fascinating story of our shared human history.